Well, that last board started spitting shavings all over the place. That means my dust collector system is full. It's time to clean it out. I'll shut everything down. I'll go dump the shavings out and get set up for another run. Now, this is not the most efficient operation you could imagine. Ideally, it'd have that planer set up somewhere in the middle in a little covered shed, or it could be even outside like I've had it before. And we'd have the unit of raw lumber on the infeed side of the planer, and then a stack here on the outfeed side of the planer. And of course, ideally, you'd have two people, one guy feeding and one guy outfeeding. When you got all of the lumber to run through, pick it up with a forklift and move it back over to the infeed side of the planer. Well, that's not going to happen here. We got the planer inside. It's been a nice day so far today, but there's too much of a chance of rain to have that planer outside here. There's no way I can get any different setup than what I got, so this is what I have to work with. The other thing is that not all of these boards, in fact a lot of these boards, are not perfect. They're going to have to be trimmed up and stuff. Some of them have checks on the end of them where the logs were checked when we cut the stuff out of them, but they're good in the middle. Some of them have rot on the ends of them where the rot started in. Those logs sat here for quite a while after we logged them. It was a blowdown out the road that we got, and it's hard to say. It might have had rot in it already. A lot of this big spruce around here in this country is rotten to begin with. Anyway, these boards aren't perfect. Some of them are going to be really nice, a full length of them. Some of them are going to be trimmed up into 8-footers or something else, but there'll be usable stuff out of all of it. Well, the next logs, I think those are all 16-foot or almost 18-foot. This one I cut the log back, trying to cut it back, the rot out of it, and I almost threw the log away, but I wound up getting some pretty good lumber out of it, so I'm glad I didn't throw it away. Well, anyway, I guess I better go clean that dust collector out. That thing is working pretty darn good now. It's sucking most of the dust right out of there. You always get a little bit that comes through the machine and stuff, but for the most part, that thing worked pretty good. So this is what my pre-filter bucket looks like. It was packed in there pretty good. In fact, the hose, yeah, it's not too bad. It's just right in the end of it there. I don't know how much is in the... Let me see how much is in the bag. Well, there's hardly any in the bag. About 4 inches or so in the bottom of the bag. So most of it went into that bucket, and that's a whole lot easier to dump that bucket out and change it out, that garbage can. A whole lot easier to change it out than it is to take that bag off of there and dump that out. That little garbage pail is so light that I've got to put weights on it to keep it from tipping over. The weight of those hoses and stuff wants to pull it over. If I had a steel drum or something there that thing fit on, it'd be a lot better, but it's what we have. Alright, I'm going to stop recording here and we'll clean up my mess and get to planing down the rest of those boards. got those two stacks of boards planed on one side. I did the one stack yesterday. Of course, I spent about half the day trying to rig up my dust collector system and get the planer fixed up and operating and everything. But anyway, I got one stack done yesterday and I did the other stack today. So I did 40 some boards yesterday and 60 some today. Well, there's still a lot of work to do on that. I got to plane the other side of them and then edge them. So I'll run them through the planer again, and then I'll run one edge through the jointer and get a good clean edge on it. Then I could either put them on the edge through the planer, but that'd take a lot of work because those are all various widths. The boards are, some of them are 6 inches, some of them are 5 3/4 and so on down the line. So it would be a lot of monkeying around to get those all through there and get them edged on the planer. So what I'll do is I'll run one edge through the jointer on them and then set up the radial arm saw and cut them to the widths that I want. Some of that wood is just absolutely gorgeous, just straight grain, knot free, just beautiful. And then there's all kinds of classifications down from that. There's some that got big knots in them. Of course, that's what happens when you work in the upper side of one of these big old growth trees. Sometimes the knots are 4, 5, 6 inches in diameter. So we've got big knots in some of them there. Depending on how the knots are, if they're a tight knot, it's not too bad. And if it's a loose knot, then it kind of depends on where it's at as to how it affects the strength of the board. And if they go through from face to face, then it's not too bad, unless it's one of those great big honking knots that's 4 inches in diameter or so. The difference between a tight knot and a loose knot, generally a tight knot, the branch was green when the tree was cut, so it all shrinks down tight together and stays uniform. But if the branch was dead when the tree was cut, then the branch shrinks down more than and the wood shrinks away from it. So the knot oftentimes will be loose in the knot hole, or it'll fall out completely and leave a hole. So again, it depends on the size of the knot and where it is in the board and what the board's used for as to how that affects the usability of the board. But if it goes through from edge to edge, that pretty much ruins the board at that point. Now we can trim it up and make shorter boards out of it where the knot goes through it, but basically that ruins the structural integrity of the knot when it goes through from edge to edge. In fact, some of those boards where the knots go through from edge to edge, they just broke when I picked them up right at the knot. So anyway, I'll be trimming those up. And then there's some of them that got a lot of shake in it. Shake is splits in the wood, and that can be caused by two different things. One, when the tree is fell, if it hits unevenly, say if the top of it hits on one side of a canyon and the bottom hits on the other side of a canyon, and it kind of buckles as it goes over there, or if it falls and hits a stump or something like that and puts uneven pressure on the bole of the tree when it falls, that can cause the wood to separate inside and cause shake. But generally what causes shake is, it's known as wind shake, especially those big trees. But when the wind blows real strong and the trees flex back and forth, and sometimes there'll be a twisting motion on them depending on where the branches are and stuff, but that causes a grain of the wood to separate and get checks, wind shake inside the log, inside the tree. Generally that happens in the heartwood of the tree, which is generally dead wood. It's dried out. Sapwood and the green wood around the outside perimeter of the tree is usually pretty strong, and that stuff then won't shake, but the shake will be in the middle of the tree. That's what causes it. The green wood can split in the wintertime when it gets really cold and freezes, and there's a lot of sap in the green wood, and it'll freeze and break. It sounds like gunshots going off in the woods sometimes on a really cold winter night, or winter day for that matter. Well, anyway, there's some of that that's got shake in it. Some of it will be usable the way it is. Some of it can be trimmed out. Some of it will be trimmed out into stuff that can be used like blocking or over window top or door top or something like that. Some of it can be used vertically for framing, depending on the shape it is. Some of it can't be used at all. And then there's some rot in it, generally from the ends of the boards in a little ways. There's some rot. Those logs sat here for 2 or 3 years from the time we cut them until the time I milled them up. They might have rotted when they were here, but most likely it was rotten when I got the logs. These big old growth timber in this country is prone to be rotten inside. Both the hemlock and the spruce, neither one of them have any decay resistance to them, and they rot pretty easily. And if a porcupine chews the bark at the bottom of a spruce tree, then you can get rot going in there. Or if a branch gets broken off in a windstorm or something, then those will get wet and pull rot in there too. Anyway, we got one part of that done. Still got a lot of work to do on it, and the weather's supposed to be good for a couple more days. Hopefully we can get all this done before it starts pouring down rain again. I got all those 2x6s face planed on two sides. I did 50 of them yesterday and the rest of them today. I didn't have a full day yesterday to work because I had to fly yesterday. Wind up cutting the middle of the day out of it, even though I only flew 2.5 hours. It takes 4 hours or 5 hours to do all that stuff, getting ready and everything, and have to do it in the middle of the day now because the sun is at such a low angle in the sky that there's so much reflection on the water that you can only see down into the water to count the fish in the middle of the day. So like I said, I did 50 of them yesterday and I did the rest of them today. Counting them up, there's 64 16.5 footers, and I think there's 34 or 35 15.5 footers, but not quite 100 of them. But then there was one quasi 2x4 and one quasi 1x4, and then I had 6 2x6s that came not out of this bunch but I had from something else. Some of those boards were a little bit thin just because of the way the bandsaw milling works. So they went through the first side either barely touching them or not touching them hardly. But when they went through the second side, then we got the second side cleaned up good. So they're all nice uniform thickness. And there was a couple of them, of course, that were just too thick. And those I didn't want to fool around with the planer once I had it set for the depth of cut that I wanted on the first face cut. So I set those aside, and then once I got everything run through there and the first face cut cleaned up on all of them, then I went ahead and adjusted the planer, opened it up so I could run them through, and then adjusted it down until I got it down to the same thickness as all the rest of them on the first cut. So on the second cut, they all went through with just one setting. So they're all pretty much perfectly uniform in thickness now. Well, the next thing I've got to do is edge them, and I'm going to edge one side on the jointer. I might have to make multiple passes with each board through the jointer to get them edged and nice and clean, but I'm going to edge them on the jointer on one side, and then I'm going to set up the radial arm saw and edge the other side with it and get them cut down to the width that I wanted. So they're all nice and uniform for that. So right now I've got to put the planer away and get it out of the way so that I can get the jointer out there and have room to work around it. That planer is just too big to move by hand, so I'll have to get the forks down here and pick it up and move it back in there and out of the way so I can get the jointer out here. Now when I was thinking about this in my mind's eye, I was going to plane a whole bunch of boards, a whole bunch of 1x and a whole bunch of other stuff that I got and get those all planed down while the weather is good here, but as usual my eyes were bigger than my stomach, so I'm not going to get that done. I got the rest of the day today to work on these, and then tomorrow it's supposed to be nice again before it starts turning off, raining again for the foreseeable future. So see if I can get these done tomorrow, and of course tomorrow I've got to fly again, so that's going to take up the middle of the day or most of the day tomorrow. So about wore myself out so far today doing these. I took a little break here, and then I got the planer all cleaned up and I sprayed corrosion proofing back on the table of it and on the blades, so it's ready to be stored away for a while again. What are you, lonely old duck, huh? Where's the rest of your crew? You can go find him. That dog's not going to bother you. No, that dog won't eat you. All right, go on by. So anyway, I'm going to get that planer pushed back in the hanger there over onto the side a little bit where it's out of the way for the time being, and then I can get the jointer out to where I can use it to work, and I'll move this stack of lumber back over here on the other side where I can grab it and transfer it. So I've got some double 2x6s stacked up there so it sits up a little higher in the air without the stickers under it, so I don't have to bend over so far to pick the boards up. But anyway, I better get to work. I got to go get that Bobcat started up so I can get down here and move that planer out of the way and get those boards moved over where I want them.